Snail and the Whale is the most beautiful book by Julia Donaldson and Axel Scheffler. It's one of the greats in their collection. It takes a tiny snail who hitches a ride on the tail of a whale, and they see how incredibly rich and precious the world is.
Snail and the Whale is one of Julia's most wonderful rhymes, in the sense that it takes you on a complete journey from start to finish and tells a complete story with this very authoritative narrator's voice.
I wrote the story quite a long time ago, probably about 15 or 20 years ago. I like stories where little creatures can help big ones. So I think I wanted to do another big, small thing. And then the fact that the snail rhymes with whale was important as well. And lots of other things rhyme with them. So, so very much the rhyming and the language was very important to me. It always is, but particularly so in this story.
The tiny sea snail sighed and sniffed. Then cried, "I've got it! I'll hitch a lift."
I'd visualised a whole variety of landscapes because it mentions the sky, the sea, the caves. So of course, initially I just see the rough sketches.
I mean, that's a great thing about Julia's books anyway, that they're always completely different, and I have a completely different setting. There were some problems to overcome. There was the scale of the snail on the tail of the whale, obviously. You can't do it in a realistic way, so I had to exaggerate the size of the snail, and I think anatomically my whale doesn't really work, so I had to cheat a little bit to make the tail bend like that. But I did enjoy painting the landscapes, and yeah, the variety of the text is just great for an illustrator.
Axel's illustrations open up the text and the world into something much larger. So the snail writes on the rock, "Lift wanted around the world," and Axel really delivers that around the world feeling. We go to so many different wonderful locations, from Europe to the tropics to Antarctica, and I think Axel creates this magnificent landscape in which our story is set.
So these are the fiery mountains and the golden sands. I had to have Julia's text as inspiration, so there's a volcano, which is a bit of danger, and then there's all the wonderful things the snail is seeing on its journey.
For many years we wondered how we could bring this deeply complex book to screen, and Max Lang and Suzanne Lang's screenplay helped crack the problem of how do you create an emotional relationship between a very small snail and a very large whale.
The key thing in a script that we're looking for, and which they are so cunning and clever at delivering, is finding the gaps in between the dialogue, the moments which can add tension and explore further how the characters relate to each other.
I don't think we changed too much, really, because the story in the book is very well-rounded and the character arcs are very clear. So we mostly tried to add a relationship between the snail and the whale and try to add little interactions with them, which is quite tricky because there's such different scales. And luckily, the first animatic kind of proved that we could do it, and you could deal with a huge scale difference and still make them feel connected.
And far off lands.
With fiery mountains and
What we discovered was that when the whale looks towards Snail, the whale looks towards him, you already establish a relationship. Most of the time, the snail is on the tail of the whale. It's very far away, but because of the editing, you feel that there's still a strong relationship between them. The world of Snail in the Whale Lake, our world, is actually, it's almost like a character in the film, because the story is really about the beauty of the world. And so we knew that it would have to look incredibly great. You had to go on this journey with Snail and experience the beauty of the world. The size, the huge scale of the world.
The approach really was, let's look at what's really beautiful about these illustrations that the parents and children will remember. And then it was just really about filling in the detail. There's a simplicity and a beauty to the simplicity of Axel's drawings, and we really tried to kind of capture that in the character of the environments, and then just sort of add a subtle layer of extra detail to make the world really expansive in CGI.
Water is really complex to do in CGI animation because you have to figure out how the water interacts with something going through it. And here we have the snail and the whale travelling all around the world in different types of water.
We also knew, just from a technical point of view, that the water effects had to be really, really convincing and great looking, because so much of the film takes place on the water or underneath the water.
It's difficult to recreate in CGI because you quickly realize that to get something that looks like how we expect it to look, we have to cheat quite a lot. We have to play with lights and we have to play with the camera. To give credit to the team, I think that when they looked at Snail and the Whale, they didn't ever want to compromise the story for the sake of trying to simplify our lives. From a technical point of view. They looked at the challenge and they got around this idea that, all right, it is a story about characters traveling through water all over the world. So we've got to do that. You know, we've really got to get that sense of scale. So we have everything from giant storms to really quiet little moments, you know, that almost look like they take place on a lake or a fjord or something like that. And the team they just sort of went gung-ho. I mean, something that was that kind of came up when we were doing the storm is originally we thought we would stage the storm at night because we'd get the most out of the lightning and that kind of thing. But then we looked back at Axel's illustrations and we realized that the storm was actually happening during the day. It was almost like a late afternoon. And as soon as we shifted from night to day, the storm just really looked amazing. It looked really, really cool. These sort of low orange, ominous clouds, you know.